The most painful part of losing someone isn't when they finally walk away. It's when they're still sitting beside you, their body present, but the essence of who they were, the very parts you once adored, has already vanished. That's exactly what happened with Laura. When we first started, everything felt natural. Her affection was never forced. It poured out of her without effort. Held me like letting go wasn't an option. Stole kisses when I wasn't expecting. Always reached for my hand in the simplest moments. Back then, love was a constant presence. Every glance, every touch carried it. It was overwhelming in the best way, undeniable and real. Slowly it began to change. It didn't crash down suddenly, that's the cruel part. It wasn't a storm. It was erosion. A gradual fade you don't notice until the damage is already carved in deep. First it was small things. Hugs lost their warmth. Instead of pulling me in, she gave me light pats. The kisses were shorter, hollow. No more lingering seconds that made the world disappear. Now they felt like routine, another box. I convinced myself she was exhausted, stressed, or just distracted. Anything but the truth that the bond was slipping away and she wasn't fighting to keep it alive. So I poured more of myself in. Gave more time, more thought. Even more money, hoping I could spark her. Planned romantic trips, bought the designer purse she casually mentioned. Surprised her with dinners we couldn't really afford. I thought if I surrounded her with beauty, she'd remember the beautiful love we once shared. But the more I gave, the less she returned. Less warmth, less effort, less interest. And yet her demands only grew. Love started feeling like a transaction. Long as I kept paying the price, she'd stay but never give. Every time I came home with something special, she'd flash that practiced smile, give me a quick peck like she was punching a time card, then turn back to her phone. And the worst part, I still wanted her. I still longed for her care. There's a unique kind of loneliness when you're lying next to someone you love yet feel emptier than if you were alone. I'd stare at the ceiling at night while she lay with her back turned, face lit up by her screen. I ached to pull her close, but I knew what I'd get: cold, stiff, like holding a statue. I couldn't bear another silent rejection, so I just lay there, eyes shut, pretending to sleep while my heart quietly cracked in the dark. To the outside world we still looked perfect. We smiled in pictures. She held my arm at gatherings. But behind closed doors the warmth was gone. The kisses were gone. She was gone. I even tried once to bring it up, told her I felt us drifting apart. She laughed, actually laughed, said I was exaggerating, then went right back to her phone as if I'd interrupted her favorite show. So I kept working harder, buying more, planning more, giving more. I turned into a one-man rescue mission, trying to save a love that refused to be saved. I drained myself emotionally, mentally, even financially, just for a spark of what we used to be. But the more I gave, the more I disappeared. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was a provider, a background prop in her staged life. And still I clung to hope. I told myself maybe if I just waited, gave a little more, she'd come back, the real her. But deep down I knew the truth. Love doesn't simply fade. It dies when someone stops protecting it. When they stop treasuring it and start treating it as an obligation. The breaking point came on my birthday. It wasn't anything grand, just dinner with a few close friends. She barely even noticed. No hug, no card, no words that mattered. She spent the night glued to her phone, laughing at messages from people who didn't bother showing up. When the waiter brought out a small cake, the one I had to order myself because she'd forgotten, she clapped a few times, smiled without meeting my eyes, and kept Scrolling. No gift, no I love you. A stranger across the table, detached and absent. And I sat there pretending everything was fine just so no one would see the truth. But inside something snapped. Not in anger but in clarity. Realized I was wasting another year of my life on someone who didn't care if I even existed. I paid the bill, drove home in silence, and that night while she curled up on her side as if I wasn't there, I lay awake replaying every moment I'd given her everything and received nothing. Every dinner, every trip, every attempt to make her smile, all met with indifference. And it hit me hard enough to steal my breath. I had been funding my own heartbreak. Every surprise, every gift, every plan was just me investing in a love that had already died. It was never about the money. It was about respect. I deserved to be loved for the man I was, not for what I could buy. So that night, while she slept peacefully beside me as if nothing was wrong, I made choice. Not from anger, not from revenge, but from clear, steady certainty. No more. No more buying her affection. No more rewarding her silence. No more acting. I wasn't her sponsor. I wasn't her bank. I was a man who had built a life through sweat, sacrifice, and endless nights, and I wasn't about to hand it over to someone who couldn't even look me in the eyes anymore. That morning I began quietly taking control back. No yelling, no warnings, just action. I canceled the joint credit cards, opened new accounts she couldn't touch. I stopped covering her personal bills. There was no grand announcement, no fight. I simply closed. Tap. Her first shock came when she tried to buy a $500 pair of shoes and her card got declined. She approached me with that honeyed tone she always used when she wanted something. "Babe," she purred. "Something's wrong with my card." Smiled calmly and said, "No, it's working. Exactly as intended." The expression on her face was priceless. Confusion, frustration, and a hint of something she never expected, powerlessness. She tried to joke, flirt, manipulate, but I didn't. And for the first time in years I was choosing my dignity, and that terrified her. I saw it in her sudden temper over little things. "You're selfish. Move. Changed. You don't care about me." Irony was brutal. After years of her draining every drop of love out of our marriage, she dared accuse me of apathy. But I stayed calm. 'Cause now I knew a truth she couldn't deny. When you cut off money from someone who never truly loved you, the reality reveals itself, and it's never pretty. It wasn't stress. It wasn't life being hard. It wasn't us drifting. It was simple. She didn't love me. Loved the lifestyle, the gifts, the comfort. Without the trips, handbags, and indulgences, there was nothing left. Warmth she once gave freely was gone. Those lingering kisses were only echoes of a love long dead. She had traded affection for material things, and when the gifts stopped, so did any effort. But I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was awake, painfully awake. And that clarity felt like freedom. I knew a storm was coming. She would either try harder to control me or she would leave. Either way, I was ready. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally started loving myself. And that self-love meant no more begging for affection. No more being her financial cushion. No more shrinking myself to fit her selfishness. I deserved something real. And if that meant starting over from ashes, so be it. Better to rebuild alone than keep living like a ghost in a house with no space for me. That was the turning point. The moment I drew a line. And once you draw that line, life shows you truths you never wanted to face. The moment I stopped financing her, the cracks in her mask widened. At first she played dumb, slamming drawers, banging plates, sighing loudly, little acts meant to guilt me. But I stayed firm. That's when the mask dropped. The fake sweetness vanished. Her tone turned sharp, her looks grew colder. She treated me like a machine that had broken down, no longer useful. No more kisses, no fake warmth. Silence. A heavy silence that said everything she was too cowardly to admit. I only mattered when I was giving. About a week later, she stormed into the living room, her eyes filled with spite. "You've changed," she snapped. Set my book aside, looked her directly in the eye and said, "No, I just stopped paying for a love that was never real." Words landed like a blow. She opened her mouth to fight back, but nothing came. We both knew the truth. The game was over. That night she moved into the guest room. We barely spoke after that. Walked past me like I didn't exist. I'll admit it hurt. Even after all the coldness, a small part of me grieved what we once were. That tiny voice whispered maybe she'd realize what she was losing. But that hope faded fast. 'Cause when you stop pouring yourself into a one-sided relationship, the truth shines through. You were the only one ever fighting. She didn't miss me. She missed the perks, the gifts, the ease. One day, I overheard her on the phone with a friend complaining that I'd become too cheap. Not a single word about love. Not one mention of the man I was. Only bitterness about no longer being spoiled. That was the final nail. I didn't hate her. Felt sorry for her. Anyone who confuses love with material gain can never understand the loyalty, respect, or depth I deserve. So I made a choice that shattered me and healed me at the same time. I told her to leave. No shouting, no begging, just a steady, calm truth. This isn't a marriage. It's a transaction. And I'm done paying. She froze, tried to twist the story, tried to wear the victim's mask, but once you recognize your worth, their tricks lose power. Her words had no weight anymore. Within a week she was no apologies, no remorse, just the cold sound of boxes being packed. When the door closed behind her, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I sat quietly, drew a long breath, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not joy. Not celebration. Just the stillness that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. When you release something long dead because you're no longer afraid of being alone. The first weeks after she left were strange. The house felt enormous. Hollow. I'd wake expecting her beside me. But the bed was empty. And slowly I began to return to myself. I cooked meals. Actually enjoyed. I picked up my guitar. Again, the same one she once mocked. Reconnected with friends she'd pushed away for not fitting her image. Bit by bit, I uncovered the man I used to be. And none of it was about money. It was about freedom. The freedom to exist without walking on eggshells. To be cared for without conditions. To breathe without owing anyone a debt of affection. Once you taste that freedom, you can never return. When she reached out months later with empty messages I didn't answer, I didn't chase closure. Regret isn't love, it's just the sting of losing convenience. Now I live differently. I invest my time in people who cherish me without price. I remind myself that my presence, my care, my heart are not commodities. And if that means standing alone until someone worthy appears, then I'll wait. Because I'd rather walk alone with dignity than lie beside someone who only saw me as a paycheck. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm renewed. And if you're hearing this, maybe it's because you sense the same truth. You deserve better. Better than conditional affection. Better than hollow gestures. Better than A love balanced on receipts. Real love has no cost. And if they can't give it, leave. 'Cause sometimes losing who you thought you needed is life's way of returning you to yourself.